The shivering stranger in the snow. The wind was cruel that day. Snow fell like cold knives on the small mining colony of Korga 7. The sun was weak, barely lighting the ice-covered streets. Most people stayed indoors, near heaters, drinking hot broth. Jace walked alone, his coat thin, boots cracked. His breath made small clouds in the air. He was cold but not surprised. Life had been hard for years now. Earth had forgotten men like him. He passed the food stalls, dry meat, frozen fruit, old tech scraps. As he turned toward the corner street, something caught his eye. There, near a broken wall, sat a small shape hunched over. At first he thought it was trash or a broken bot, but then it moved. Slowly. Weakly. It was a woman, an alien woman. Her skin was a soft purple, now pale with cold. Her long black hair was stuck to her face with frozen tears. She held two small children close, wrapping her arms around them like a blanket. But her own body shook. She had no coat, only rags. The children weren't moving much. Just soft whimpers escaped their lips. Jace stopped walking. People passed by, not even looking. A vendor nearby shouted, "Filthy beggar, go freeze somewhere else." The woman didn't answer. She just curled tighter as if trying to disappear. Jace walked closer. She noticed him. Her eyes were large, glowing, faintly green. She looked scared, like he was another man come to push her away. But he didn't speak. He looked at her. Then he looked at the tiny shop across the street. There, a thick thermal blanket hung on a hook. He stepped inside. "1 credit," the shopkeeper grunted. Jace reached into his coat. His hand found his last credit chip. He hesitated. That was it. No food tomorrow, no fuel for heat, nothing left. He handed it over. Outside, the woman flinched as he approached. "I'm not here to hurt you," Jace said softly. She said nothing. He bent down, opened the thick blanket and wrapped it around her and the children. She gasped. Her eyes filled with tears. One child whimpered louder, feeling the warmth. "Why?" she whispered. Jace sat beside her against the cold wall. "You're freezing," he said, "and I had a credit I wasn't using." She looked down at the blanket, then at her children. She began to cry, quietly, not loudly. Just soft sobs that shook her thin shoulders. Jace didn't move. He didn't want to scare her. He just sat, sharing the cold. After some time, she asked, in a low voice, "You have no home?" "I have a small hut," he replied. "It's warm. It's not much. But it's better than this." She looked at her children, then back at him. "We don't want to trouble you." Jace shrugged. "Trouble is already here. Might as well face it together." The snow began to fall harder. The cold bit deep. "Come," he said. She stood slowly, still wrapped in the blanket. She lifted one child and the other walked beside her. Jace helped carry a small bag, only a few old clothes inside. They walked in silence. When they reached his hut, it was small, 1 room, 1 heater, 1 broken bed and a wooden chair. But it was warm inside. She entered carefully, unsure. The children huddled near the heater. She took off her wet rags, dried the children's hands, then bowed her head to Jace. "My name is Sira," she said. "I'm Jace," he replied. Sira looked around. "This is more than we've had in weeks." He nodded. "Make yourselves at home." That night, Jace gave her the bed. He took the chair. She tried to argue, but he smiled. "I've slept on worse." Sira placed her children on the bed. They were asleep in seconds. She covered them with the blanket Jace bought. She sat on the floor near the heater watching the flames. Jace watched her quietly. "You didn't have to help," she said suddenly. "I know," he replied, "but I couldn't walk past you." Sira looked at him, her eyes soft. "You're strange for a human." Jace smiled faintly. "I've heard that before." Silence filled the room, but it wasn't cold anymore. In the warm orange light of the heater, the alien widow sat with her children safe, and a man who had nothing gave her something no one else did: kindness. The small heater crackled softly, casting warm orange light over the tiny hut. The snowstorm outside had turned the world into a howling white blur, but inside, for the first time in many nights, Sira's children were safe. They lay curled together on Jace's bed, wrapped tightly in the blanket he had bought with his last credit. Sira sat beside them on the floor, her back resting against the wall, her long dark hair, now dry, draped over her shoulders. She stared into the flickering flame, unmoving, as if afraid to close her eyes and wake to find this safety gone. Jace sat in the wooden chair near the door, arms crossed, eyes half closed. He wasn't sleeping either. His body ached from the cold and the long walk, but his thoughts were louder than his pain. He didn't even know why he had helped them, just that he couldn't walk past them and do nothing. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. In fact, it felt needed. Words weren't important tonight, only warmth. Eventually, Sira turned her head and looked at him. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. Jace opened his eyes and gave a tired smile. "I don't need to. I saw enough." She hesitated. "What did you see?" He nodded toward the sleeping children. A mother doing everything she could to keep her kids alive, even when the world turned its back. Sira's eyes shimmered, but she looked away quickly. "Most humans don't care, they think we're less." "Then most humans are fools," Jace said simply. There was a long pause. The wind howled louder, shaking the door, but neither moved. Sira stood and walked slowly toward the heater. She lowered herself beside it and stretched her hands near the warmth. Her thin fingers were still red from the cold. "I don't have anything to give you," she whispered. Jace chuckled softly. "I didn't ask for anything." She looked at him again, confused. "Why are you helping me?" He thought for a moment, then said, "Because someone once helped me. I was starving, sick, and lost. A stranger gave me food and told me, one kind act can save a life." That stayed with me. Sira was quiet, then gave a soft nod. "You've saved more than one life tonight." She sat quietly for a while. Then she did something unexpected. She reached for the pot near the wall and opened it. It had a little rice left. She looked at him. "May I?" she asked. He nodded. "Please." She started to cook. The smell filled the hut, warm and gentle. When it was ready, she filled 2 small bowls and handed one to him. Her hand still shook a little, but she smiled faintly. They ate slowly. The food was plain, but it tasted better than anything either had eaten in days. When they were done, Sira quietly rinsed the bowls and tucked her children in tighter. Then she walked to the center of the room and sat cross-legged, wrapping her arms around herself. "Sleep on the bed," Jace offered again. She shook her head. "You already gave us shelter. I can sleep on the floor." He didn't argue. He just placed an extra cloth beneath her to soften the floor. Then he returned to the chair, but this time he found himself watching her longer than before. The curve of her shoulders, the slow rise and fall of her breath. There was something beautiful in her sadness. She noticed him staring and smiled just a little. "You're a strange man." "You keep saying that," he replied, smiling back. Sira looked down, then said softly, "You make me feel safe." It was just 4 words, but they made Jace's chest feel heavy in a strange way. Not bad, just full. That night, no one said goodnight. No one had to. Hours passed. Jace finally drifted to sleep in the chair, head against the wall. Sira woke in the middle of the night to check her children. They were warm, smiling even in their dreams. She turned and looked at Jace. The chair looked hard, uncomfortable. Quietly, she stood and walked over to him. Her steps were soft, careful. She reached out and took the folded blanket from the bed's edge and gently draped it over him. As she did, her hand brushed his cheek. He didn't wake, but his head moved slightly, toward her touch. She stared at him for a long moment, then whispered, "Thank you." Before returning to her place near the fire, she glanced at him one last time. In a world that had given her nothing but pain, this man, this human, had given her shelter, food, and hope. And though the heater burned low and the wind roared outside, in that tiny hut on Korga 7, the cold no longer won. The storm had passed, but the cold still held the colony in its grip. Morning light crept through the cracks in the wooden walls, painting the floor with pale golden lines. Jace stirred first, stretching in his chair. His back ached. His neck was stiff. But when he opened his eyes and saw the alien woman asleep beside the fire, a soft smile formed on his lips. Sira was curled up like a child, her face peaceful for the first time since he had seen her. The two children were still on the bed, their tiny arms wrapped around each other like vines seeking warmth. The thick blanket covered them up to their ears. Jace rose quietly and stepped outside. The sky was clearer today, pale blue, and the air smelled of snow and metal. He gathered a few scraps of wood from the back of the hut, enough to keep the heater burning. Then he stepped back in and placed the wood gently on the fire. The sound stirred Sira. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking at the warmth. "Good morning," Jace said softly. She nodded, still waking. "You slept well?" "About as well as a man can in a chair," he replied with a light grin. Sira sat up slowly, rubbing her arms. Her voice was quiet when she spoke again. "You've already done too much for us." Jace shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." She paused, her eyes on the flames. Then, as if the silence was pulling her in too deep, she whispered, "Do you want to know what happened to us?" He sat on the floor across from her, nodding gently. "If you want to tell me." Her lips pressed together. She took a long breath, and then it began. "We were from Torvanis, a calm world, peaceful. My mate was a pilot. We had a small home by the river. It wasn't rich, but it was safe." Her eyes drifted. "When the war reached us, everything changed. The skies turned red. We fled with only what we could carry." Jace said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was permission to continue. "We reached a refugee ship. They took us in. There were too many. No space, little food. When we arrived at this colony, they told us we weren't allowed to stay unless someone sponsored us. My mate went back to look for help." Her voice cracked. "He never returned. His ship was found in pieces." Jace lowered his head. "I'm sorry," Sira continued, her voice barely a whisper now. "I tried to work, but aliens like me, we aren't wanted here. No ID, no credits. People spat at me, called me a leech. My children cried from hunger. So I begged. I hid. I slept in snow." Tears formed in her eyes, but she didn't blink them away. "One day a man offered me a room if I cleaned for him, but it was a lie. He locked me in, tried to sell me off. I escaped. With my children, we kept walking, hiding, until that night you found us." She looked up at Jace now, her voice steadier. "That was the night I thought we might die." Jace felt something twist in his chest. He reached over and gently placed his hand on hers. It was cold, but she didn't pull away. "You're not alone now," he said simply. For the first time, Sira's lips curved into something close to a smile. "I don't understand you," she said softly. "Why? You're kind. But you live alone with nothing. You spend your last credit on strangers. You offer your bed without question. Why?" Jace looked into the fire. The answer came slowly. "Because I've seen what the world looks like when no one helps. I know that pain. I won't be one of the people who turns away." She was silent, again. But this silence was warm, not heavy. "I used to sing to my children," she said suddenly, "before the war." "Why did you stop?" There was nothing left to sing about. Jace stood and walked to the corner. He found an old kettle, filled it with snow, and placed it on the heater. "Maybe it's time to start again." She looked at him, surprised. "Sing?" He smiled. Even the saddest songs carry hope. Sira stared at him for a long moment. Then, quietly, she began to hum. A soft, haunting tune in a language he didn't understand. The children stirred slightly, as if they recognized the sound in their dreams. Jace didn't speak. He just listened. Her voice, though fragile, filled the small hut like a warm blanket. By the time she finished, she was crying again. But not from pain. This time it was release. A piece of her past had returned, not to haunt her, but to heal. 3. Days passed and the snow kept falling. Life in the mining colony moved on slowly, but inside Jace's small hut, something warm had begun to grow. Sira no longer flinched at every sound. Her children laughed again, soft, cautious laughs, but real ones. Jace repaired a broken stool, fixed a leak in the roof, and traded an old tool for dried vegetables. Sira cleaned the space with care and cooked meals using what little they had. In the evenings she sang again, and her children often fell asleep, in her lap, wrapped in the same thick blanket Jace had once given her. But peace never lasted long in places like this. It was just after dusk. The fire was crackling and Jace was teaching the children how to stack kindling. Sira was stirring a pot of soup, her face glowing in the warm light. Then a sharp knock came at the door, 3 hard raps. Jace froze. Sira's hand stopped mid-stir. Her face went pale. The knock came again, louder this time. "Who is it?" Jace called. No answer. Only the sound of the wind, and then a voice. "I know she's in there." Sira's body tensed. Her hands trembled. She whispered, "It's him." Jace stood up slowly. "Who?" Sira didn't look up. "The one who locked me in the storeroom. He called himself Varn, said I owed him shelter and food, said he owned me." Another knock, followed by a hard kick against the wooden door. "I'm not asking," the voice growled. "Bring her out." Jace glanced at the children. They were silent now, huddled under the bed. His jaw clenched. Varn kicked again. "You're just a broke human squatter, Jace. Everyone knows it. You can't protect her." Jace stepped toward the door and grabbed the old mining spade he had leaned against the wall. He looked at Sira. "Stay back, don't open the door for anyone but me." Sira reached for his arm. "He's not alone. He always brings others. You'll get hurt." Jace looked into her eyes. "I won't let him take you." Then he opened. The door snow blasted in, sharp and cold. 3 figures stood outside. Varn, a thick alien with green-scaled skin, and 2 others behind him, thinner but armed with stun rods. "Well, well," Varn said, grinning. "Still playing hero, huh?" Jace didn't speak. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "Move aside," Varn growled. "She belongs to me." "She belongs to no one," Jace replied. Varn laughed. "You think you can stop us with that toy?" He pointed at the spade. "You've got no money. No power. You're nothing." "I'm something to her," Jace said, "and that's enough for me." Without warning, one of the men lunged forward. Jace raised the spade and blocked the strike, but pain exploded in his shoulder as the stun rod grazed him. He stumbled, then swung back and knocked the attacker off his feet. The second man came fast. Jace ducked, hit him in the stomach, and shoved him into the snow. Varn roared and charged, punching Jace hard in the side of the head. Jace fell. The spade clattered to the ground. Varn stood over him. "Stupid human," he growled. "You could have stayed quiet." Now, a scream broke through the night. Sira. But it wasn't a scream of fear. It was a cry of fury. Before Varn could finish his sentence, Sira slammed a rusted metal rod into his back. He roared and turned, but she struck again, this time across his face. Blood sprayed across the snow. "You don't own me," she screamed. Jace, still on the ground, watched as she stood over Varn, panting, shaking, but not backing down. Varn tried to rise, but she hit him again and he dropped, like a sack of stone. The 2 other attackers scrambled to their feet, but when they saw Sira, eyes burning with rage and Jace rising beside her, blood on his lip but still standing. They ran. Silence returned. Only the wind remained. Sira dropped the rod. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her body still trembling. Jace reached for her hand. It was warm, alive. "You didn't stay inside," he said. "I couldn't," she whispered. "Not when you stood for me." He looked at her, eyes full of both pain and pride. "We stood for each other." Together they dragged Varn's body far into the snow and left him near the old colony gates. A warning. No one would come looking. For him. When they returned, the children rushed out and hugged both of them tightly. Sira knelt down, holding them close. Jace collapsed into the chair, wiping blood from his mouth. That night, they didn't eat. They didn't sleep much. But they knew something had changed. They had fought back, together, and the cold had finally met something stronger, love and defiance. The wind had calmed by morning, but the pain in Jace's body had not. He woke with a deep ache in his ribs and a swollen bruise along his cheekbone. Every breath stung. Still, when he opened his eyes and saw the soft flicker of firelight and heard quiet humming in the room, a strange calm washed over him. Sira was crouched near the heater, gently mixing herbs in a small clay bowl. The scent was strong, earthy, bitter, but oddly comforting. Her children sat nearby, helping her crush dried leaves with smooth stones. Their faces were calm again, focused. Jace tried to sit up but groaned. His head spun. Sira turned quickly. "No, don't move too fast," she said, rushing to his side. "You took more hits than you think." "I've had worse," he muttered. With a faint grin, she gave him a look. "You're a terrible liar." She pressed a folded cloth against the side of his face, soaked in the herbal paste. It burned at first, then faded into a warm numbness. Jace flinched only once. "You didn't have to come out and fight," he whispered. "You didn't have to give us shelter," she answered. Jace looked into her eyes. "You could have stayed hidden. You risked everything." "I've spent too long hiding," she said quietly. "Last night, I remembered I was still alive." For a moment neither spoke. The fire crackled gently between them. Jace leaned back, letting her clean the cuts along his arm. Her hands were gentle, careful. She worked without words, but each touch said something more. When she was done, she sat beside him, not across the room like before. The children brought over a small wooden bowl filled with broth. Sira held it out. "Eat this. It's not much, but it will help." Jace took it, sipping slowly. Warmth spread through his chest, not just from the soup, but from the way she looked at him. Like he mattered. Like someone who had been invisible was finally being seen. After he finished, he leaned back again and asked softly, "Why were you carrying those herbs?" "You use them like a healer." Sira smiled faintly. "My mother was a village healer on Torvenis. She taught me before she died. I never thought I'd use those lessons again." "You saved me," he said. "You saved us first," she replied. The firelight flickered across their faces. Outside, snow still covered the world, but inside it felt like spring had crept into the room without asking. Later that evening, Jace fell asleep again, this time on the bed. Sira tried to insist he take it alone, but the children were already curled on the floor near the heater, giggling and whispering stories to each other. She had no choice. She lay beside him carefully, her movements slow and shy. She pulled the blanket over both of them. Their bodies didn't touch at first. But, in the quiet as the fire dimmed and shadows danced on the walls, Sira slowly turned on her side. Her hand brushed his. He didn't pull away. Instead, he whispered, "Is this okay?" She nodded. "Yes." He reached for her hand and gently held it. Her fingers tightened around his. "I thought I lost all feeling," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But being here, with you, I feel warmth again. Inside." Jace turned to face her. Her face was close now, her eyes bright in the dim light, her breath warm on his skin. "You don't have to say anything," she said quickly. "I know this is strange." Jace shook his head. It's not strange. It's honest. Sira looked down. I don't know how to be close to someone anymore. I'm still broken. He reached up and gently touched her cheek. We're all a little broken, but maybe we can heal. Together. Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled. You say such kind things. Because I mean them. She moved, closer, resting her forehead against his. I was so afraid I'd lose myself. She whispered. You didn't. He whispered back. You're still here. That night they didn't do anything beyond lie side by side. No promises. No pressure. Just two souls, lost in their own pain, finding peace in one another's warmth. As the fire burned low and the children finally drifted to sleep, Sira wrapped her arms around him gently, holding him like she feared he might disappear by morning. But he didn't. And for the first time in many long nights, neither of them had nightmares. The days passed quietly. The cold remained, but it no longer felt cruel inside the small hut. Sira and Jace moved like they had always shared this space. The children laughed louder now. They played in the snow outside, knowing someone waited for them inside. Jace spent his mornings fixing things, finding old parts, and bartering what little he could. Sira kept the hut warm and full of life, singing softly, cooking small meals, patching torn clothes. They didn't speak about what they were. No one used words like family or love, but it was there in the way Jace handed Sira his coat before going out. It was in the way Sira made sure he ate before resting. It was in the way the children called him our warm human. But peace is always short in places like Korga 7. One afternoon, as Jace returned from the trade post with a bag of seeds and a cracked solar lamp, he spotted something unusual, a transport ship. Not the usual mining cargo hauler or patrol cruiser. This one was different. It was painted white with silver markings and flew the banner of the United Species Refugee Council. He froze. By the time he reached the hut, Sira was already standing at the door, her eyes wide. Her hands were shaking. You saw it? She asked. He nodded. Council ship. First I've seen here in years. Sira looked pale. They're searching for stranded refugees. That ship, it's from the colony I applied to long ago. Jace's chest tightened. A safe world? Yes. Warm. Clean. Children can go to school. No fear. No begging. She looked up at him. They said I had to wait until my case was reopened. That could take years, unless someone reports that I'm here. Jace swallowed. Maybe someone did. An hour later, a council officer knocked gently at their door. She was tall, with soft blue skin and kind eyes. We're looking for a refugee named Sira of Torvenus, she said. Sira stepped forward, holding her children close. I'm here. The officer smiled warmly. We've confirmed your case. You and your children are cleared for relocation. A safe colony awaits. Your transport leaves at first light. Sira's breath caught. Her children stared up at her, confused but hopeful. That's good, right? Jace asked, forcing a smile. The officer nodded. Very good. But only registered individuals can board. I'm afraid companions must remain here unless they're bonded or have council approval. Jace's smile faded. So, I stay. The officer bowed politely. Thank you for sheltering her. Few would. As the door closed, silence filled the room like cold smoke. Sira sat on the floor, her children still pressed to her sides. Jace stood frozen near the fire. You should go, he said quietly. This is everything you hoped for. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. Without you? You'll be safe. The kids will have a future. Tears formed in her eyes. And you? I'll manage, he said. I always have. Sira rose and walked to him. You gave us life again. You gave me myself. Jace turned away. This was never about me. She gently took his hand. But it became about you. He looked at her, his heart aching. I want you to go, truly, but not because I want you gone, because I love you enough to let you have more. Her lips trembled. You'd stay here, alone. Again? He said nothing. That night, they didn't sleep. The children packed what little they had, asking if Jace would come too. Sira could only shake her head. When the children finally slept, Sira sat beside Jace near the fire. Her head rested on his shoulder. There's one option, she whispered. Bonded partners are allowed to travel together. Jace turned to her. You mean, marry? It's only paperwork, she said. A council bond. It doesn't have to mean anything. He stared at her. Doesn't it? He asked. Sira didn't reply. Slowly, she reached for something under the bed, a small folded cloth she had sewn from scraps. She opened it, revealing something Jace didn't expect. A single credit chip. He frowned. Where did you get that? I saved it, she said. In case I had to leave without saying goodbye. He took a deep breath. Sira gently pushed it into his hand. But now I know. I can't go without you. The next morning, when the transport prepared to leave, the council officer called the names aloud. Sira, of Torvenis, bonded partner, Jace of Earth. The officer paused, surprised. You're bonded? Jace looked at Sira. She nodded. Yes, they both said. The officer smiled and stepped aside. As they boarded the ship, the children cheered and ran ahead. Sira and Jace walked slowly, fingers intertwined. The door closed behind them with a soft hiss. For the first time in a long, cold world, they were going somewhere warm, together. The transport ship hummed gently as it soared through space. Through the small window near their seats, stars drifted past like glowing dust. Sira sat with one child asleep on her lap, the other curled against her side. Jace sat beside her, watching, quietly. His hand rested between them, open, relaxed, and after a moment, Sira placed her hand in his without a word. They had left behind the snow, the hunger, and the silence. What they carried now were memories, some painful, some soft, but all woven together with something new, hope. The council transport was simple, clean, and warm. The air didn't sting the skin. The food, though plain, was fresh and hot. Each passenger had a clean blanket, soft bed, and promise of a new beginning. Jace had never experienced something like this, not even on Earth. Later that night, after, the children were tucked into the sleeping pod assigned to their family. Sira pulled the old blanket from her small bag, the same one Jace had wrapped around her the night they met. She held it up and looked at him with a small smile. I couldn't leave it behind, Jace chuckled. Neither could I. She spread it over the two of them as they sat side by side in the quiet rest chamber. The lights above were dim, and soft music hummed through the walls, meant to calm nerves and lull tired travelers to sleep. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sira turned to him. Do you remember the first thing I said to you? He nodded. Why? She smiled. And you never really answered. I didn't have to, Jace replied. You already knew. She rested her head on his shoulder. I still don't understand it. So many passed me by. I was nothing to them. I didn't look like them, didn't sound like them, but you saw me. I didn't see an alien, he said softly. I saw someone freezing to death with her children. That's all. She was quiet for a long time. Then slowly, she took his hand and placed it against her heart. Jace, she whispered, I know we bonded for travel, but I meant it. He looked into her eyes. So did I. Sira's voice trembled. I'm not perfect. I'm still scared sometimes. I still wake up in the dark and expect to hear shouting or be pulled away again. but when you hold my hand, I feel safe, like I have a place. Jace smiled. You do, with me. They sat in silence again, wrapped in the blanket that had started it all. But now it was more than just cloth. It was a symbol, a memory of a moment when kindness changed a life. The next morning, the ship docked on the green and gold surface of Leora 5, a peaceful colony planet with forests, rivers, and bright skies. Birds flew over domed homes and clean roads led to open schools and free markets. It didn't look like the cold mining colony they left behind. It looked like something out of a dream. The children ran out first, laughing, arms wide as they felt the soft wind and smelled blooming flowers. Jace and Sira followed, slower, hand in hand. The council welcomed them with soft smiles and gave them a modest home. Small, but clean. 2 rooms, a garden patch, a real heater, a real stove. When they stepped inside, Jace set the bag down and turned to her. This is yours now, Sira turned, her eyes shining. No, she said. Ours. The children bounced on the empty bed and claimed the back room. Sira walked to the window and pulled the blanket from her shoulder, folding it slowly. I want this to stay with us, she said. No matter where we go. Jace stepped behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. We'll never need to trade it, he whispered. We already traded everything for each other. She leaned back into him. Some people say love grows slowly. It does. But ours started with a blanket in the snow. Jace smiled. And now you warm my bed. But more than that, you warm my soul. She turned around to face him, her eyes filled with something deep and quiet. Not a rush of passion, not wild desire, but something stronger. Peace. I love you, she said simply. I love you too. They kissed then. Not hurried, not unsure. But like 2 people who had already shared every word that needed to be said. Outside, the children called for them, laughing in the sun. Inside, Jace and Sira stood in a home they never expected. Built, not from bricks or credits, but from survival, trust, and the soft weight of a blanket shared by 2 lonely souls. And though the world would change, seasons would pass, and life would go on, one thing remained true. Love begins in the strangest moments, and sometimes it begins with a single simple act of warmth.